Gerardo, you've had a different journey. You're in one of the, if not the most popular band to ever come from your hometown of Austin. So, what has your journey been like to get to where you are in your sideman career?
Yeah, I mean, I moved to Austin in 2005, and I was playing just in local bands for a good 10 years. And I mean, it was a jump from going to from the local scene directly to getting the gig with Spoon. And I mean, that was it's a pretty life-changing event. You know, first of all, it's like as a musician, how do you join a band that has that history and that has that reputation already, right? And it's kind of a tough gig to just walk into because personally, like mentally, you have all these things like, am I good enough? Do I deserve this? Like how am I going to continue this gig and like be successful at it? And I guess at the end of the day, like Doc said, you know, my thing is to always over prepare because I don't want to suck. Even though at the end of the day, you know, there's times when I do suck. So yeah, it was just it was a pretty, like I said, life-changing event in terms of what I was used to, where I was at, and then all of a sudden coming into this completely different machine, the way that everything works. So it was, I mean, it was pretty awesome.
So, how did the gig come along for you?
So I've been friends with Jim, who's the drummer, since pretty much since I moved to Austin. I came through his studio multiple times with different bands, and he's an amazing producer, and his studio it's like a world-class studio. So I had been coming in and out through the years, and through the years we became friends. He would call me in for session work with the stuff that he was producing, and eventually one day he called me. He was like, "Hey, you want to get lunch?" And I was like, "Sure." I just thought he was going to talk about a new project or something like that. And he was like, "Hey, we have an opening in the band. Would you like to audition?" And I was like, "Yeah, why not?" And it was funny because that weekend I was playing with Third Root, which is one of the side projects of Adrian Casada. And it was like, I'd never heard this music. We had a gig with Third Root coming up in like 2 days. So I had to learn all this music. I was also playing keyboards for this band called Money Chicha, and they had a 2-hour show. So we had 2 hours worth of music that I had to learn. And that, like 2 days later, I was supposed to audition for Spoon, and I was like, shit, I don't know how I'm gonna have to let somebody down. But again, I just stuck with it. I like practiced my ass off as much as I could, and I nailed the audition, and that's it. I've been with them ever since.
It's such a great story. Dan, do you have anything sort of that sounds familiar for how you got to Ice Nine Kills?
I mean, I'm in a unique position because almost all of the gigs that I've been like recognized for have all come from like internet situations. Ice Nine came about from my previous work with my old band as Blood Runs Black, and because me and Ricky, the other guitar player for Ice Nine, had crossed paths in the past, he put my name in Spencer's mouth, and Spencer reached out to me on Instagram and just offered me, like, he said, we're auditioning people. If you want to check it out, go ahead and do it. Check out these songs. And I sent him the audition videos within like 2 hours. And he was like, what the fuck? This is a lot faster than we expected. And also, are you interested in the gig? And it was completely uncalled for. But my previous gig with As Blood Runs Black was also completely internet based. Like I connected with them just on talking online. And then similar to all these guys, how there's just like an opportunity where there's an opening for an audition, and you just kind of like, you do your work to be the right person in the right place at the right time. Without any of those three things, it's not going to work out. So I feel like I got lucky and I had done the work and gelled with the guys, and it just worked out awesome. And it's been definitely the most fun band I've been a part of to date, for sure.
Have you gone through lots of auditions and that sort of thing similarly before?
This is actually amazingly my third actual band, but it's because my first band, Fallen Figure, we were supposed to sign with Metal Blade, and then I joined as Blood Runs Black instead. and then after As Blood Runs Black, I joined Ice Nine Kills. So the string of bands make it seem like not too much happened, but like I was in ABRB for like 9 years, 8 years, Fallen Figure for like 8 years before that. So I think I'm loyal, if anything.
Well, Mike, what's your perspective on the sideman from the manager's point of view? Are you getting hit with unsolicited videos and that sort of thing for the bands that you've represented over the years?
When there's an announcement that somebody's been removed, absolutely, if it's public. But, I think my perspective is, it's a wonderful role to have somebody play. And you kind of hit the nail on the head in your intro, Paul. When there's money that's available to be able to pay somebody of the caliber that you want, I think it's a win-win for both sides. As a manager, especially with a band like, at the current time, Ice Nine Kills, or like Refused in the past had sidemen, it's like they've got enough of an established identity that really we need somebody to come in and be utilitarian at the very least. You take a guy like Dan, and from knowing Doc as long as I have and from hearing these other guys, it's like, and then from that place of like, okay, I'm coming in to do a job, they start to add their own influence, which is really, when it's done tastefully, is a win-win for everybody.
Oh, good. I want to get into that in a little bit later, because I think that's an important piece. Doc, was there an emotional transition when going from self-directed artist to sideman, or were there other challenges that you didn't expect?
I mean, I think overall there can be a lot of advantages because you don't have you have less emotional investment. You don't have to worry about dealing with the merch or booking renting the bus or dealing with the trailer. You pretty much have to just show up and do the musician part, which is kind of when you have your own band and you're especially building it up from a DIY perspective. That's kind of what you dream of, is when you can, man, it'd be nice just to have to play. And I think one of the most important things it teaches you, much from like, I guess you could make a lot of sports analogies, in that you learn how to fulfill different roles. And there's a time to be the band leader, and there's a time to essentially be a support role. And I've been in certain situations, like when I was out with that band Maytal, where I was out, most of the band was green and they hadn't really toured a lot. And so I had to become kind of the mentor guy and kind of help teach people, like, okay, this is how you kind of act on the road. This is how you kind of load your gear on stage. This is how you deal with the tour manager. This is how you kind of act on a bus. Just little things that you don't even anticipate that you're going to have to deal with. And just kind of figuring out, like I said, I end up kind of being the MD, the musical director with a lot of my bands, partially because it's just my natural, the way I approach things. But I think it's also, in different scenarios, people find your skill sets almost innately, and like, oh, that person's good at this, and you kind of have to do that. But at the same time, you also can't have too many cooks in the kitchen. You have to know when to shut up and be in the back and take direction. And sometimes, it's you have to be able to kind of swallow your ego sometimes. And I'm, like I said, I play in a band with two of the guys from Metallica, and sometimes you gotta just shut the fuck up and be in the back. And not in a terrible way, but it is, so you have to, like, because part of being good is, especially acting like the rock star, is knowing when to use your ego as like a surfboard so you can perform well and be that person. And then you kind of have to be able to turn that off in these other times when you have to act in this lesser role.
Owen, can you build on that a little bit? I mean, you're one of the greatest songwriters I've ever heard. How often do you sit in a room, like especially a rehearsal room, and you're hired in as a musician? How do you find that line that you need to straddle between where you feel that you can make it better, but maybe even stepping beyond just that role as a musician?
Well, yeah, I think that that sort of those nuances are what define professionalism. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that kind of blends. We have to use our personality a little bit as a tool to know when maybe your input is going to sound like you're overstepping, or to know when maybe your input is really what people are looking for to help kind of work through a part or a recording idea or whatever. It's difficult. It's just like reading any room or knowing your audience. You know, from gig to gig, you could work with an artist that is, you know, begging you to come help co-write the next album, or you could be working with somebody who is sort of begging you to stay home, maybe figuratively or literally. And yeah, I don't think it's case by case. There's no clear answer. And also I think it's important to realize that, you know, the other people in the room, to know when your input is not even really needed. You know, sometimes it should, most of the time in music, you know, be the best idea is the one that sort of makes it to the top. And, you know, I think a big part of professionalism is just knowing when it's somebody else in the room that is having that idea, and knowing when it's you, and knowing how to speak up and maybe kind of help influence things for the greater good.
And how do you sort of value those contributions? Do you ever, you know, how do you broach a topic like publishing and songwriting credits in that sort of situation? Is that a case of
it's tough, man? You hope that the person that you're working with, you know, will be able to recognize the value that you're bringing to it, but it doesn't always work out that way. I mean, sometimes you take less of a percentage than maybe you think you deserve, but it's, you know, you appreciate the opportunity for the work enough to where, you know, you're willing. Sorry, my dog is barking. You're willing to, you know, take some sacrifices on your side just for the opportunity. But of course, that's not every situation either.
Totally.